Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching this year's last episode of Security Scan. So we will, in the next half an hour, talk about how 2020 has been as far as the Indian security scenario is concerned in terms of the weapons development and more specifically rather, the indigenous weapons development. There has been a lot of work which has been done during this year, not only in terms of policy to further the focus on indigenization, but also in the laboratories as well as on the field to give us a more indigenous weapon systems. So we will try and understand in the next half an hour about all these weapons indigenously developed, platforms indigenously developed, and the policies which support them. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with retired Commodore Anil Singh. He is the Vice President of Indian Maritime Foundation. We also have with us retired Major General Ravi Arora, Chief Editor of the Indian Military Review, and Mayank Singh also joins us, senior journalist who looks at the defense. Let me begin with you, Mayank, and let's start by taking sort of an overview as to how 2020 went by in terms of the indigenous development of weapons or platforms. There were a lot of them, the QRSAM, the MRSAM, as well as Project 17A and ATGMs and several others as well.
Right. The topic which you have chosen has been hurting or has been a bigger impediment towards what we call the strategic independence in terms of fighting the wars with your own weapon. So, but the biggest line or the bottom line has been in 2020 that a major push, at least in terms of intentions and beginnings. These two things are very important to point out when you talk of 2020. And you already have narrated certain specifics, ATGM, anti-tank guided missiles, MRSAM, medium-range surface missiles. So let us divide it into Army, Navy, and Air Force. So when you see that in that term, the biggest achievements, and to start with in last 3-4 months, and the trigger has been whatever happened in May along the LAC in Eastern Ladakh. The success stories have been majorly in the missiles technology or the tests, validations which have been done in terms of missiles. And those missiles include from air to ground, from ground to air, from surface to surface, and anti-tank, anti-electronic warfare, these missiles, and then you come to Army. A bigger success, major success has been another area which has been hurting the Army, that is artillery. And here also you have inducted your own gun. So small weapons are rifles, and whatever the artillery uses, topkhana in Hindi, that is gun actually. So you have inducted your own gun. Your private industry, that has also come up very well, and they have been testing their gun in the recent time. Mm-hmm. But the bigger success majorly, and since quite a long time, has been coming from the Navy side. And that started with Leander class 1965 and 63 and all. Navy had taken a very far-sighted and foresighted decision in 1965 to create its own Department of Naval Design. So they had been designing their warships, their submarine sections and all. And another indigenization which has taken place since last 7-8 years is the metallurgy. This is very significant point because metallurgy still hurts you when you have your fight section in a equipment, when you have a move section in your equipment. Move comes as far as engines are there, wheels are there. That defines the move section. Okay. Your engines, the metallurgy has been hurting you since quite long in the engine section also. And but on the sidelines, defense grade steel has been made. So your warships primarily, they are being made from the steel which is being produced in Sales Steel Authority of India Limited now, SAIL. Okay. And see, engine technology, since we'll be discussing this point threadbare in a very elaborate manner, Technology in terms of engine, because of metallurgy, is a sore point and still remains so. But as you said, there has been major achievements, and metallurgy has also come into it.
Okay,
Coming to
okay.
Air Force, your light combat aircrafts, light combat helicopters, they have also come up. LS Drew has been proving itself time and again. So that is also another area where rotor wing success has also come to you. So you will have your own helicopter which can fight. And weaponry is another section. Missiles, yes, you have been doing well. You have to put up the guns which might be needed to be produced within India. So
Okay.
that is a section of things.
Okay, definitely. That seems a lot of work which has been done as far as indigenization is concerned. That brings me to General Arora here. General Arora, from your perspective, what are the key highlights when we look at 2020 from the focus on indigenous weapon systems aspect? And let's not only talk about the achievements which have been there, but also policy tweaks which have enabled those achievements also.
Yes, Vishal, I'd like to talk about policy because this year was very important. I was looking back at the security scan episodes, and I find you have covered all aspects of policy. And in a nutshell, when Def Expo happened in Lucknow this year, the new defense procurement procedure was announced. It came in with a lot of changes, giving fillip to Make in India. I'll come to that a little later. Then there were flip-flops in offset policy. The FDI policy has changed. The DRDO has come out with a list of items which will be left to private industry to research. The Ministry of Defense has published a negative list which progressively will be banned from importing those items. The MSMEs have been given incentives. A push has been given to the defense corridors. The defense acquisition and the defense production and the export promotion policy has been announced. Corporatization of OFB has advanced a little bit. The capital budget has been divided between domestic procurement and foreign procurement. The Department of Defense Production has also made a portal called Cirigen where our vendors can go and look up which are the items which require indigenization. In the new policy, very importantly, Mayank was also touching upon the aero engines and fab manufacturing has been classified as a national mission. So these are the kind of changes which has taken place. I'd like to dwell a little bit on some important ones.
Okay.
One is this negative list. There is a difference between Make in India and Made in India, made by Indians and made for Indians. So indigenization is actually made in India, not make in. Make in India is people being invited to come take advantage of our labor, our land, our resources, make it here, take it away, export it, supply to anyone you like, but that doesn't make you self-reliant. So these items which have now been put on the negative list progressively up to 2024, some items every year will go onto that list. Those items will not be imported. They have already been manufactured in India. Some types have been manufactured in India. The domestic industry can bank on developing them, designing them, manufacturing them, offering them to the armed forces. So now they can focus on those items. It will lead to Make in India. And remember, in the last 5 years, if you see, we bought 3.5 lakh crores of items, almost 260 items. And what is projected is that we will be buying 4 lakh crores of items in the next 5 to 7 years. So with so many items gone on the negative list, it's but natural that many of the items will be purchased in India. So the domestic industry can focus on the R&D. Second important thing which has happened is the DRDO releasing a list of 108 items which they will help Indian industry to do R&D on. Now, again, they will offer testing facilities, they will offer instrumentation, they will engage with their own DRDO vendors, big and small, and DRDO will exit from those items. You see, now, What has this got to do with indigenization? If the public sector was making it, if the DRDO was producing it or designing it, you can say it was indigenization. But no, it's not the same thing. The PSUs were having a comfort zone in which they were manufacturing items with specification from God knows when, from Second World War. And they were not comfortable with dealing with high technology and taking on new stuff. The private industry is going to take up these things. The corporatization of the OFB is going to be another big thing, making it more efficient. The 49 factories have been a white elephant so far. Now there will be independence, there will be accountability, there will be responsibility. Okay. And so we expect better produced stuff to come up.
Okay.
Export promotion policy is very, very, you could say, ambitious. But then if you have set a target of 35,000 crore rupees for export, well, at least some of it will be achieved. Okay. MSMEs have always been, they have always been unhappy, although there are policies, they are not implemented very well. But the best part is the Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020, in which new categories have been laid down with indigenous content for by Indian, that is Indian designed, developed and manufactured. They want that 60% should be indigenous content, and then it will be considered as by Indian.
Okay.
So this way, percentages have been laid down.
Definitely. These are very, very important salient points, General Arora. And from the policy perspective, what you pointed out in terms of the DAP 2020, as well as how the focus has been on indigenization. And these policy tweaks have definitely furthered, this entire cause of making all these weapon systems or parts, ammunition out here in India only. One aspect, and that is about Indian Navy, that brings me to Commodore Anil J. Singh. And Commodore Singh, it's not the first time that, Indian Navy has been lauded for their approach towards indigenization. It has been going on for some years. But if you look at 2020, how would you look at the way Indian Navy has worked upon? There have been ships and corvettes which have been launched, one under Project 17A and some others as well. Specifically, if you look at Indian Navy, and also an added aspect to the policy tweaks which General Arora was talking about, how significant do you believe they are?
Firstly, let me talk about the Navy. I think in the case of the indigenization, insofar as the Navy pursues it, it has been an ongoing process, as Mayank said, for the last 5 or 6 decades. So we are progressively, incrementally enhancing the level of indigenization. And what Mayank also alluded to was when we look at a ship, we look at its float element, its move element, and its fight element. So today, the Navy can very confidently say that the float element, which is basically the hull and the superstructure, indigenization accounts for about 90%. And that's, like he said, because all steel now being used for ship manufacture and warship manufacture in India is Indian. There is no more steel being imported. All the grades of steel that are required are available in India, indigenously developed. Then we come to the move element. In the move element, so far, we have been we haven't really been able to keep pace. We could confidently say we are at about 60% indigenization. Most valves, move means what makes a ship move. So it's propulsion systems, it's engines, it's systems, it's pipelines, it's valves, it's reducers, voltage regulators, etc., etc. So in that, while we have achieved 60%, and a lot of good work is being done by the MSME sector in India in developing these technologies and providing them to the Navy, but certain core areas like gas turbines. Now, most of our destroyers are powered by gas turbines. We do not manufacture gas turbines in India. So that's a critical area which we need to address. So there are certain areas which need to be focused on. Then we come to the fight element. Now, fight element is the weapon and sensor package on a ship, on a warship. In that, we have made remarkable progress. All hull-mounted sonars on all Indian warships now are Indian. Most radars on all our warships are Indian. Now with missiles like the BrahMos and all becoming standard fitment, missiles are going to be Indian. We have the Varun Astra torpedo, which was recently tested to be fired from surface ships. That is Indian. So there is a progressive increase in the amount of indigenization happening in the fight element also. So what used to be around 30%, I would say would now be about 45 to 50%, because certain critical technologies are still required from abroad, which we are in the process of developing. However, what I would like to emphasize is, and again, coming to the second part of your question about the policies, there have been a slew of policies this year, as General Arora brought out, as Mayank brought out, and all of them are geared towards enhancing self-reliance and indigenization. But this is not the first time that the MOD is coming out with ambitious policies like this. And every time the MOD has floundered in its implementation. So we only hope that this time the intent is there and the intent to follow through with this is also there. The third element which comes in when you talk about these policies, I'll just take 30 seconds.
Please,
is that we must never forget one basic fundamental fact. The industry is for the armed forces. The armed forces are not for the industry. So you cannot experiment with what the armed forces get based on what you would like your industry to do. The industry has to pull up its socks and deliver to the armed forces what the armed forces require to win a war for this country. That fundamental fact should not be forgotten. Very often we seem to be getting a little cobwebs seem to be coming up as to who's developing for whom. So I think from that perspective, these policies are good. They're positive, but now it is a question of being able to walk the talk on these.
Okay, definitely. It is pointed out rightly by Commander Singh out there that ultimately the industry, be it the PSUs or the private sector, will have to cater to the armed forces, their requirement as well. That brings me again to Mayank. Mayank, as Commander Singh was pointing out, the intent is good, the policies are good, as were earlier detailed by General Arora as well. But now the most important part is to do the follow-through and to ensure that they are implemented in letter and spirit to achieve the aim with which they were put in place.
The science of everything, which is theory of science, is known to everyone. And what comes, the soaring point to India has always been the technology. And if we can come categorically, that is niche technology. And when you talk of niche technology, there are only counted few countries which you bank upon, or to whom are you expecting that they'll be transferring technology to you. The point here comes is, if they transfer that same technology to you, what is going to give them that edge in a war? And in that case, you will always have to be dependent on the scientific community, which produces things, which is able to find that formula, which is called niche technology, and should be added to your country. Now, you have been talking of this point since last almost 30-40 years in a very big way. The focus in terms of intentions, in terms of policies, is seen quite vividly, quite conspicuously since last 4 or 5 years. There has to be a focus on the scientific community, also involving the private people, wherein they are sure that if they invest some amount of money, army, the customers, if you say so, the people who will utilize that technology, if they invest huge amount of money, that is going to be secured in certain manner or in some way, so that spin-offs can also be used in the civil sector. So that remains the very critical point. Now let us come to the co-option of the industries. You have been doing well in that term, but until unless those people show the confidence, and those people, the kind of technologies they are using, the kind of options they have, the kind of joint ventures they have, it is to be brought in so well in a meshed manner that it becomes utilized very well with the armed forces.
Okay, definitely. That brings me to General Arora here. General Arora, would you agree to what Mayank is pointing out here, that ultimately it's all about niche technology, and the focus seemingly should be more and more on R&D, and that, a tie-up between the public and the private sector there, because seemingly the private sector has more hands-on sort of experience as far as technology is concerned, and the public sector seemingly has the infrastructure.
I think you know the answer. The public and the private sector have to do it together. There is no other way. The reality check really is, look at the amount of equipment we have and how much of it today is indigenous, considering that this movement of indigenization started in 1992 when Dr. Abdul Kalam, who was scientific advisor to the defense minister, said we must take this initiative, self-reliance initiative, and a self-reliance index was worked out. That is the amount of defense domestic production to a ratio to the overall defense procurement. And it was found that it is 0.3. 70% of our stuff is coming from imports. 10 years later, when the target time came, 2005, they still found it is 0.3. It had not changed. Today, it might be 0.4.
Arora, I'd like to point out just one small thing here. You know, all these things which you're listing out there definitely are the legacy issues. They have been there for quite some time. All of us know the reality out there. But as you're pointing out earlier, that the answer lies in, you know, public sector and the private sector moving hand in hand with each other. Question here is that a move has been made, you know, both in terms of policy tweaks, also in terms of, you know, for example, the ordnance factory boards as well, their corporatization in a specific manner to give that push. The idea is to give that final push from here onwards, and therein the research and development and the niche technology becomes really critical.
Yeah, but with that, our procedures must also change. We can't rely on this L1 procedure forever. You know, although we have been giving some fillip to innovation and we have got this Make 3 procedure, but still implementation is missing. There are people who are producing world-class stuff. The way forward is because the public sector, the DRDO has got large resources. DRDO has a budget of 8,000 crore rupees every year. So many projects are foreclosed. If the private sector is involved with them, there will be lesser foreclosures. Then the armed forces must also get involved, like the Navy gets involved with industry. So these are the things which you know, going to help.
Okay. That brings me to Commodore Anil J. Singh for a quick comment. Commodore Singh, in terms of that focus on niche technology and research and development, that seemingly is the key to most of the questions which we are facing in terms of short supply or indigenization.
Let me just spend a minute on niche technologies. Now we have to accept the fact, and I think we have accepted the fact that as far as world-class leading technologies go, we are not in the same league as contemporary technologies being used by even our own competitors. And we have recognized the fact that for certain areas, we will have to collaborate with foreign OEMs, we will have to collaborate with foreign governments, foreign technology providers to develop those niche technologies internally. There is no getting away from it, because if you have to equip your armed forces with what they need and of the quality that they need, then you will have to do this. Otherwise, our armed forces will be fighting with weapons that are 50 years old, which is not acceptable.
Okay.
So when you want to develop a technology, a niche technology, you have to do co-production, firstly co-development, and then co-production. Foreign OEMs are willing to come forward with it. Maybe not give their absolute cutting-edge technology, but certainly technology which you still don't have. Unfortunately, the ecosystem in India does not support such a model. Very often, the DRDO will just want an item. So with the result, we don't end up with know why. We only end up with know how. Okay. And why don't we get these niche technologies? Because we have an L1 culture. You want technology, you got to pay for it. Nobody's going to give you technology in an L1 environment. Okay. So there is a fundamental disconnect between what we want to do and how we're going about wanting to do that. This needs to be addressed by the MOD very, very immediately and very, very seriously.
Okay, definitely. There are certain points which need a further relook as far as policy or structure or having that ecosystem is concerned. The work is being done, as our panelists were pointing out. There have been a lot of achievements during this particular year in terms of indigenization, but a lot more ground needs to be covered as far as this aspect is concerned. Once again, I'd like to thank all my panelists for their views. Commodore Anil J. Singh, General Arora, as well as Mayank, thank you so much for being part of this particular show. And also, I would like to wish all of you and all our viewers on behalf of all my colleagues at Rajya Sabha Television a very happy new year. Please ensure that you stay safe, follow all COVID safety protocols and enjoy the new year. Thank you.